It's a pleasure to welcome you. I'm happy indeed that you are present for a meeting which is not only of vital importance in our state, but one of particular concern to those of us who are responsible for guiding the various functions of government, but the meeting which is highly unusual in nature. North Carolina is the first state in the southeast, and except for 3 New England states, the first in the nation to schedule a briefing of government officials on the progress of its survival plan. That we should have been so chosen and found in position to comply with the request of the Civil Defense Authorities of Region 3 is neither unusual nor surprising, although commendable. Being first is a North Carolina habit of long standing. We have much ground to cover, and by way of explanation as to why we are here, there are several points I'd like to bring to your attention. As Chief Executive, I'm charged by state law to prepare a comprehensive plan and program for the civil defense of this state, to coordinate that plan and program with the civil defense of the federal government, and to coordinate the preparations of plans and programs for civil defense by the political subdivisions of this state. Such plans to be integrated into and coordinated with the civil defense plan and program of the state. It's a large order. Let's examine the law further and understand just how civil defense is interpreted. I quote Chapter 166 of our General Statute. Civil defense shall mean the preparation for and the carrying out of all emergency functions, other than those for which military forces are responsible, to prevent, to minimize, and repair injury and damage resulting from disasters caused by enemy attack, by sabotage or other hostile action, or by natural disaster. Civil defense is not set up as a separate governmental unit to take over in time of emergency. It's a coordinating agency to direct the integration into existing government those emergency responsibilities which would be necessary in the event of an all-out war. There are 2 major things we must strive for in civil defense. First, to prepare for continuity of government in emergency. The continuity of government so strong that it will increase our capacity to survive as a free and vigorous nation. Within that nation, we want to prepare our state to survive as a free and vigorous state. To achieve this, there must be strong support and effective planning by and within every agency and department of our government. There can be no weak spot if we adhere to our long-established policy of doing everything possible to pull our own weight. In North Carolina, we've always believed in doing what we can to help ourselves and the free nation of which we are an important part. The second major aim of civil defense is to prepare for sound and effective radiological defense against nuclear attack, particularly upon people, animals, and crops. This also requires special participation and utilization of many government agencies. The responsibility for civil defense weighs heavy. This was true when the law was written, and it's infinitely more so now. We are acutely aware and would remind you who are either elected or appointed to discharge responsibility to a government of the people, for the people, and by the people, that the words to prevent, to minimize, and repair injury resulting from disaster caused by enemy attack have a vastly different connotation now than when they were written. It was serious enough then, and now it's terrifying even to contemplate. Not necessary, nor is it my intention to dwell on the seriousness of our international situation, but there are several points in all good conscience that I must mention here. The development of nuclear war weapons, the development of swift means of delivery, and the implied threat to the nation's survival have been reported, interpreted, and presented for public consumption by authoritative government sources through every available medium. The possibility of attempted conquest of the free world by a coldly calculating dictator of a totalitarian government has been with us for some time. Recently, it seems that such aggression could be started advertently or inadvertently by a dictator who is not only capable of cold calculation, but who could be given to irresponsible and careless acts. Some quarters indicate that Russia's ambition to control a warm water port to serve as an outlet for her goods through the Mediterranean, an ambition of which the world has been recurrently reminded since 1944, when the communists took over the Albanian government, is now approaching realization. Through critical years, Soviet desire has brought upheavals in Greece and Jordan and Israel. More recently has brought the increasing rapprochement between Egypt and Russia and the Turkish-Syrian situation, an open sore for over a year. Immediately after the word of the President's illness reached the Soviet Union, they renewed threats of aggression against Turkey, indicating a sensitivity of the Soviet masters to take advantage of every weakness on the American political front. These things I mentioned to emphasize the fact that this ambition, or a similar one, by a ruthless and or reckless aggressor, can once again set the spark to an all-out war, which in these perilous times would mean worldwide conflagration. With reference to the scientific race, the American intelligence abroad and political leaders at home have in the past tried to reassure the American public that our scientific know-how would make it impossible for Russia to win in an arms race. The launching of the satellite Sputnik shows how mistaken they were in that assumption. The satellite itself is relatively unimportant, but the instrument, the device used to launch the satellite, proves conclusively that the Soviet Union has the means to produce the intercontinental ballistic missile. The implications of this fact are staggering. For the first time since the United States assumed leadership of the free world, we are now negotiating the Soviet leaders from an apparent position of weakness. As long as we had a stockpile of atomic bombs and apparently had the lead in the development of hydrogen bombs, we were in a position to deal firmly with the Soviet Union because of our superiority in weapons. Until the United States proves her strength by the successful launching of an intercontinental ballistic missile, her position of world leadership has been shaken and will continue to be insecure. It is only common sense to assume that the greatest deterrent to enemy aggression, whether it be reckless or the result of cold calculation, is to achieve a state of total readiness. Interest and public concern about missile development is understandable and healthy, but we should bear in mind that when our civilian population is hit by a nuclear weapon of any kind, consequences will be terrible and devastating no matter how they're delivered. At such a time, the thing that will be important to our security and survival is how well we are prepared, not what means our delivery is employed. The survival of our nation depends upon the ability of state and local to continue to carry out their responsibilities in the event of massive nuclear attack. In grave emergency, we must have complete plans for expansion and continuity of strong, capable, coordinated government at all levels, not for the sake of government itself, but because if we do not have capable leadership, we have chaos. We've invited you here today to learn firsthand what your state is doing to protect life and property in the face of this ever-growing threat of nuclear warfare. As leaders in North Carolina, our task will become even more important should a state of emergency arise. I urge your careful attention to and consideration of the projects and plans which will be outlined to you. In the spring of '56, we contracted with the Federal Civil Defense Administration for a survival plan project or study to be financed from the appropriation made by Congress to that agency for its National Survival Plan program. The undertaking was deemed advisable because of our long coastline and seaports, our military bases, our agricultural and industrial developments and capacity, plus our potentialities as a reception and support area for neighboring metropolitan areas. A survey was to be made and a plan to be outlined to answer such questions as, if any enemy disaster should threaten North Carolina in the immediate future, if it were necessary to order evacuation of critical target and target areas, what would happen? Who would go where? By what route? By what means of transportation? Would proper facilities be available to care for evacuees, and where? How fully would they be utilized? What about food and shelter, emergency information? How would it be given to the public? This is just part of the work undertaken by our state civil defense, the agency to which is delegated the planning for the preservation of the life and the property of our citizens. The efforts of our agency depend largely for any degree of effectiveness upon the thorough cooperation of all responsible government officials. It is the responsibility of every department and agency to make its own contribution toward the state of readiness that must be achieved. The stakes can be very high. I have asked General Griffin, our Director of Civil Defense, to acquaint you with the progress which has been made.
We thank you, Governor Hodges, for that very fine statement. We honor this morning to have with us the Regional Administrator for the Federal Civil Defense Administration, a lawyer of 30 years service, a former Second Judge of Tennessee and a Judge of the Court of Appeals of Tennessee, a Colonel in the Strategic Air Force in World War II, and a Judge of the U.S. Court of Appeals for Germany after trying the Nazi criminals. He's considered the outstanding Regional Administrator in the entire Federal Civil Defense Administration. I present to you Judge Tom Goodman of Knoxville, Tennessee. Governor Hodges, General Griffin, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is with considerable pride, both professional and personal, that I meet with you today to review the progress made in this great state of North Carolina, planning for the survival of your people, your state, and your nation in the event of aggressive action by the enemies of democracy in this nuclear age. I say personal because while a native Tennessean, my forebears were Tar Heels, and I have kinsmen among you from the Catawba to the Cape Fear. I say professional because it has been my privilege as Regional Civil Defense Administrator to work closely with your governor, with your state civil defense director, your departmental officials, your congressmen, and your senators in the development of the competency which today reveals itself in the maturity of this planning report. I am proud to say that in this great Southland of ours, 6 of the 7 states are in the advanced stages of plans for survival. Needless to say, North Carolina has been to the forefront in its energetic approach, as will be more fully revealed in the report which your planning staff has for you today. I am grateful not only for the cooperation extended to the regional and national staffs of the Federal Civil Defense Administration, but for the characteristic good neighborliness afforded your sister states in working out essential coordinated action. Should such a fateful day come as that which we must contemplate, and I fervently pray that it will not, I have the utmost confidence in the intelligent and courageous manner in which the people of North Carolina will face it. And this confidence stems not from hearsay, but from personal experience, born of disaster, knowledge gained from actual observance of the admirable efforts of your governor and all officials of the state, county, and cities, and of your citizenry under the brunt of 4 fierce and devastating hurricanes. I am convinced that with your initiative, your genius, your fortitude, and the leadership of your great governor, there exists a great reservoir of strength toward which your state and your nation may well look and depend upon with confidence.